Come on, guys.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get going. We are in chapter 24. All right, and as we were talking on last time, remember we were talking about how Paul is now dealing with this experience of talking to these leaders. And he's talking to, he talked to two governors, and he's going to talk to one king of a province. And the interesting point about this is that we bring to an awareness as to how God deals with leaders and the aspect that he does deal with them. Oftentimes we forget that any role of leadership is God given. Now, the thing about it is, when God gives you that role of leadership, you have now been given a awesome responsibility, and that requires you to live up to the task of that appointed role. He will give you the abilities, he will give you the wisdom, he will give you what you need, and he will also tell you that you will have to seek him for certain things. Jesus talks oftentimes about seeking ye shall what? Find. All right. So that's part of our experience. So you say, well, that only applies to people that are leading like businesses and governments. No, it applies to any type of leadership. A parent is a God-appointed leadership role. So when you become a parent, you are given by God the responsibility to lead the lives of those people to whom you are a parent to. And in any aspect, we can go on and on and on. I'm sure we can all think of different aspects and different roles in life where you are thrust into leadership situations. But of course, the most visible ones are those that lead the masses, like your political leaders and leaders of state and government and nations. And so this is what Paul is talking to. Remember, Jesus did this too. Jesus talked to the religious leaders. Who were the religious leaders of his day? Pharisees, Sadducees, right? So he talked to all of those individuals. And remember, he ended up telling them something because they wanted to tell Jesus that, you know, who we are and our position gives us all this prestige and so forth and so on. And our father is Abraham, da da da. And Jesus had to turn around and tell them that your role and your actions as a leader in this religious community shows to me who your real father is. And what did he say?
Your father's of the devil.
He said, your father is the devil. Why? Because he said, you do the deeds, what? Of your father. So, to whom much is given, much is required. So once you have been given opportunities and given blessings and given things, and remember, leadership roles are a blessing. You just have to look at it from that standpoint. Sometimes it's difficult because it requires a lot of activity, some energy, you know, and all these different things that sometimes we don't think we have. But that's another beautiful part about it, is that God will show you have things in you that you really don't know about. All right, and we can go on that. But with that as a prelude to what we're talking about, let's go ahead now with chapter 24 of Acts. It's this.
Chapter 25. Now when Festus
25?
was come
24.
into
Which one are we on? We're on 24, right? So let me get the right one then. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Chapter 24. And after 5 days, Ananias the high priest descended with the elders and with a certain orator named Tertullus, who informed the governor against Paul. And when he was called forth, Tertullus began to accuse him, saying,
Seeing that by thee we enjoy great
No, you know what? We are in 25.
very word.
We did that.
Let me see.
Yeah, we're in 25. We are in 25.
Yeah, we are in 25.
Yeah, all right. So I was saying 24, and we were actually 25. All right, everybody got it?
25.
My mistake. All right, here we go.
Chapter 24. And after 5 days,
All right, I'm gonna get it right.
Ananias
I'm gonna
the
get it
high
right.
priest descended. chapter 25. Now when Festus was come into the province after 3 days, he ascended from Caesarea to Jerusalem. Then the high priest and the chief of the Jews informed him against Paul, and besought him, and desired favor against him, that he would send for him to Jerusalem, laying wait in the way to kill him. But Festus answered that Paul should be kept at Caesarea, and that he himself would depart shortly thither.
Let them therefore,
Said he,
which among you are able, go down with me, and accuse this man if there be any wickedness in him.
and when he had tarried among them more than 10 days, he went down unto Caesarea, and the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, commanded Paul to be brought. And when he was come, the Jews which came down from Jerusalem stood round about, and laid many and grievous complaints against Paul, which they could not prove. While he answered for himself,
Neither against the law of the Jews, neither against the temple, nor yet against Caesar have I offended anything at all.
But Festus, willing to do the Jews a pleasure, answered Paul and said,
Wilt thou go up to Jerusalem, and there be judged of these things before me?
Then said Paul,
I stand at Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to be judged. To the Jews have I done no wrong, as thou very well knowest. For if I be an offender, or have committed anything worthy of death, I refuse not to die. But if there be none of these things whereof these accuse me, no man may deliver me unto them. I appeal unto Caesar.
Then Festus, when he had conferred with the council, answered,
Hast thou appealed unto Caesar? Unto Caesar shalt thou go.
And after certain days, King Agrippa and Bernice came unto Caesarea to salute Festus. And when they had been there many days, Festus declared Paul's cause unto the king, saying,
There is a certain man left in bonds by Felix, about whom, when I was at Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews informed me, desiring to have judgment against him. To whom I answered, It is not the manner of the Romans to deliver any man to die, before that he which is accused have the accusers face to face, and have license to answer for himself concerning the crime laid against him. Therefore, when they were come hither, without any delay on the morrow I sat on the judgment seat, and commanded the man to be brought forth. Against whom, when the accusers stood up, they brought none accusation of such things as I supposed, but had certain questions against him of their own superstition, and of one Jesus, which was dead, whom Paul affirmed to be alive. And because I doubted of such a manner of questions, I asked him whether he would go to Jerusalem, and there be judged of these matters. But when Paul had appealed to be reserved unto the hearing of Augustus, I commanded him to be kept till I might send him to Caesar.
Then Agrippa said unto Festus,
I would also hear the man myself.
Tomorrow
said he.
thou shalt hear him.
And on the morrow, when Agrippa was come, and Bernice, with great pomp, and was entered into the place of hearing with the chief captains and principal men of the city, at Festus' commandment, Paul was brought forth. And Festus said,
King Agrippa, and all men which are here present with us, ye see this man, about whom all the multitude of the Jews have dealt with me, both at Jerusalem and also here, crying that he ought not to live any longer. But when I found that he had committed nothing worthy of death, and that he himself hath appealed to Augustus, I have determined to send him, of whom I have no certain thing to write unto my lord. Wherefore I have brought him forth before you, and specially before thee, O King Agrippa, that after examination had, I might have somewhat to write. For it seemeth to me unreasonable to send a prisoner, and not withal to signify the crimes laid against him.
All right, so there we go with chapter 25. Now, the thing to keep in mind here is that this is the kind of behind the scenes posturing that is going on between the remains of what Festus of what Felix did, and now Festus, and then the movement of Paul and the advice of King Agrippa. Now, what we see here is a lot of times we're going to get I think a clear view as to how people actually do business in political circles. All right, how y'all doing? And a lot of times what you end up seeing is that people in political circles don't really care about doing what's right. They really don't. What are their main concerns? What's the main concern of a lot of these people in these political circles?
Their own personal stuff.
That's right. They want to get what? Reelected. You know, they want to be able to have a sense that their judgment is favorably looked upon by whoever they deem to be people that will give them the greatest advantage. All right. Now you watch how things happen in our own world, in our own civilizations. All right. Look at America. All right. We're dealing with politics, and we're coming up in next year. We're going to have another election. All right. And so they're going to be looking at various groups, because if you can get the group to vote as a mass, then you can do what? You just have to win that group. That's why it's so important to be able to have your own opinion. And we all sometimes have agrees upon things, but it's important to know what you feel is right. And just because you are an American, or just because you are a woman, or just because you are a man, or just because you are one ethnic group or another, does not mean that you should always vote or have an opinion this way. Now, you may still have that opinion, but you should make sure that your opinions are what? Your opinions, your points of view, all right? And so what we see here is that Festus and Felix, they're going to be utilizing these behind-the-scenes, and King Agrippa too, using these behind-the-scenes ways of how we're going to do business and look good. All right, so let's start this off. Let's look at it. It says, now, when Festus was come unto the province, after 3 days, he ascended from Caesarea to Jerusalem. Then the high priest, all right, remember, Festus is a leader of the Roman province. The high priests are the leader of what? The religious community. Okay, so we're dealing with how the religious community and the civil government is interacting. And don't think they don't interact even when today. It still goes on. It's been going on, and it will continue to go on. They talk as much as they want to talk today about the separation of what? Church and state, but that's neither here nor there when it comes down to doing what they want to do. But keep this in mind. Listen. It says, then the high priest and the chief of the Jews informed him against Paul and brought him. Okay? So now they're telling them he's telling Festus about Paul. About all the stuff that they were accusing him of. And their main concern is they want to get Paul back to where? Prison. Back to their province, to Jerusalem, where they are, so they can do what? They want to kill him. They're not interested in a trial. They're not interested in bringing him into a civil court or a religious court. They want him dead. And why do they want him dead? Because he keeps talking about what?
Their establishment.
Yes, he is. But what is he talking about? Jesus. He's talking about Jesus, and he's saying Jesus is what?
The Messiah.
He's alive. The Jewish leaders did what to Jesus? They killed him. And they figured that once we killed this man, it was what? Over. But Jesus, the whole reason why we even celebrate this day is because of what? He has what?
Risen.
He has risen. And because he has risen, it has annoyed the Jewish religious leaders. They will not accept it. Though some of them in their own understanding know there's something more to what they are trying to deny, but refuse to even investigate or check it out. I don't want to believe that. I don't want to accept that. Or it's not to my advantage to believe it. It's not to my advantage to accept it. All right? It will disrupt what I got going on. And so therefore, this is what they do. So now they're trying to get into the ear of this new governor, because Festus has taken the place of Felix. Remember last week we talked about Felix. And now Felix kept Paul in jail for what? For 2 years. Even though he knew and said with his own mouth that Paul had nothing against him, there was no accusation against him worthy of his bonds, worthy of him being in jail. All right? So now, one reason why I want to kind of deal with these details like this is because you're going to see this, and you may see it in our lifetime. Now, Stephanie texted me today And she said on CNN they had this thing about how they were in China, they were arresting people that were in house churches. Because they don't want house churches in China. They want a government church in China. So they want a church in China that's very similar to the relationship to what we see going on here between Festus and the Jewish religious leaders, where the government and the religious leaders work hand in hand to bring forth the message or what we want the people to hear. We don't want anybody working independently of what we're trying to persuade the people to accept and to believe. So in China this morning, what we find out is that they went out on Easter, on Resurrection Sunday, and went out and arrested people that were in house churches. Interesting. I'm sure they'll have some more highlights on that. And when she texted me that, I said, okay, I got to go onto the web later on, and I want to see the article myself. All right. But I think it's important to keep in mind. We see these things. Remember, everything that has been done in the dark is going to be what? Brought to the light. That's what the scripture says. And it's brought to the light by the word of God. All right? And when we get further on into this, we're going to talk maybe even next week. I want to bring in something from Ezekiel, where God allows Ezekiel, go in here and let me show you what your religious leaders are doing. And he basically gives them he gives Ezekiel this little hole in the wall, and when he looks through the hole in the wall, he can see what his religious leaders are doing and how they're worshiping all these false gods and all these idols and stuff. And he goes, and they don't believe that I see them, but I want you to see what I see. And he shows Ezekiel all these things that are going on amongst his religious leaders. It's very sad in one sense, because you figure, all these wonderful positions are given to people by God, but then they will not acknowledge him as God. All right, but let's go on. In verse 3, it says, and desired favor against him that he should be sent for him to Jerusalem, laying in wait in the way to what? Kill him. Verse 4, but Festus answered that Paul should be kept at Caesar's, and at Caesarea, and that he himself would depart shortly thereafter. All right. So Festus is like, no, I'm not sending him down there. I'm going to keep him in Caesarea. All right. And he understands too. He knew that basically they wanted to kill him. But now the thing about Festus is that he can't just go out there and let an innocent man be put to death, because that's going to put his job at jeopardy. Because the Roman civilization at that time, believe it or not, had a very, very stringent and orderly way of doing government business. They really kept tabs on things to the best of their ability from back then, and they did a very good job. And a lot of our modern day governments are built and based upon a lot of the fundamental and foundational stuff that the Romans actually had established. Verse 5, it says, let them therefore say he which among you are able, go down with me and accuse this man, if there be any wickedness in him. He says, so basically saying what? Send your witnesses. Send all the people that got accusations against him with me, and we'll go down and we'll accuse him. All right? If there's anything wrong. 6, and when he had tarried among them 10 days, he went down unto Caesarea, and the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, commanded Paul to be brought. So now Festus says, I want to see Paul for myself. Bring him here. Verse 7. And when he had come, the Jews which came down from Jerusalem stood round about and laid many and grievous complaints against Paul, which they could not prove. So when you make things that you cannot prove against somebody, you either have lack of evidence or you're lying. I wonder which one this one is. All right, so they couldn't prove it. Verse 8. While he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews, neither against the temple, nor against Caesar have I offered anything at all. So have I offended anything at all? So Paul, when he answered for himself, he says, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything to the Jewish folks. I didn't do anything that offended the temple, and I didn't do anything that broke the law of the land, Caesar's law. He goes, I'm innocent of all of these things. Verse 9, but Festus, willing to do the Jews a pleasure, what does that mean? He wanted to please them. Why was Festus? Why would Festus want to please the Jewish leaders?
He wanted to stay in power.
That's it. Why does a president, well, not so much the president, but any person that's running for government office, he wants certain groups. All right, you want certain groups and groups that you might not even agree with, but because they got a big voice, or there's so many of them, you want to be able to say, well, I got to find out what they like and make sure I throw them a lollipop, so throw them something they like. All right, and that's all part of the political aspect, where it's difficult that a religious leader, if he could just believe, I am here and I'm going to do what's right, whether it seems to be something that's going to allow me to keep my job for next year or not, since I'm here, I'm going to do what's right. Unfortunately, we don't have leaders like that in a lot of places. They won't just say, well, I'm going to do what's right and not what's popular. Well, we'll have thousands of followers. We'll get all the votes. We'll have, it will just grow. It will just be big. The membership and all these different things that persuades and motivate why we will do certain things has nothing, a lot of times in our modern day, and of course back then too, to do with what's right. And that's the thing that I'm harping on, because that's what we're going to need as we go down through the years now, as it's getting closer and closer, and we see things happening, and there's so much going on, and sometimes it's hard to even believe some of the stuff that you hear that's happening. We're going to need people that are going to do what's right, period. I know that this is what the Lord would have us to do, and not trying to appeal to the masses. It's very important. All right? So it says, where are we at? Verse 10?
Yes.
Then said Paul, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to be judged. No, I didn't finish verse 9. But Festus, willing to do the Jews a pleasure, answered Paul and said, will you go up to Jerusalem and be judged of these things before them? Now, see, once again, this is Festus saying, now I know that's what the Jewish people want, and he's trying to do them a favor. So then Paul answers that, and he recognizes, I know that you're trying to do them a favor, but it's still wrong. And he says, then Paul answered and said, at Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to be judged, to the Jews I have done no wrong, as thou very well knowest. So now he's saying, I'm not going back down there. The charges that are against me was that I was trying to overthrow the government. That was basically what the charges were, because that's the only thing they could do to get. And they're saying that I'm trying to get up this following of people that want to overthrow Caesar. That's the charge you have against me. That charge has nothing to do with the Jewish people. It has nothing to do with the temple. That's a charge against Caesar. So if that's the charge you got against me, I should be judged by Caesar. I have to go there. I'm not going back down to Jerusalem, because that's not what you charged me with. You didn't charge me with disrupting different things. That's the only charge that you can feel that you can get to stick against me, is the charge that I'm trying to offend and take over the leadership of Caesar, which coincidentally was the same thing that they accused who of? Jesus. See? That's the only thing they could do. They said, well, you know what? We're gonna put the accusation on Christ that he's setting himself up as king. He says he's the king, and we only have one king, and our king is Caesar. And they put that charge against him. And Pontius Pilate looked at this man, and this man, he said he's king of some other kind of power. He hasn't said he's king over Rome. He said his kingdom is not of this earth. He says, because if it was of this earth, my followers would come and fight, but it's not. So Pontius Pilate even had to say, I find no fault in this man. All right. Well, it's going to continue. All right. And what we see going on behind the scenes here is going on right now as we speak. All right. Be not, thinking that just, everybody is really looking out for my betterment. No, everybody is looking out for your ability. When I say everybody, let me rephrase that so you know what I'm talking about. Certain leaders in certain places in certain areas that want you to do what they want you to do. In other words, if you're going to talk about Jesus, all right, and how Jesus says that there's certain things that we're going to believe in, all right, there's no follower of Jesus that's perfect, but there is perfect trust in Jesus. Whereas you say, you know what, I might not be able to explain to you why certain things are against God and why they're wrong and why we shouldn't do them. I might not be that theologically or that scientifically or that intellectually deep enough to explain all the ins and outs. But I do know this. The Lord told us that we should have one husband and one wife. All right? So if that's what the scripture says, and I don't know, I can't answer all the questions as to, well, is a person born gay or if a person is that way. I don't know the answers to all that. All right, but I do know this: the Lord told me in His Word that and in Romans that a man should not lay with a man and a woman should not lay with a woman. Now that's what the Scripture tells me, and I'm going to follow Jesus, even though I might not know all the information. But I do know this: God knows, and so therefore I'm going to believe that. And so when they tell you that you have to accept, now I heard on the radio last week, this woman on the radio saying that if a person, and she's sounding all, all nice and if a person looks at a couple and sees a couple that is gay and a couple that is traditional and sees them in any way different, then there's something wrong with that person. You should be able to not be able to see the difference between two men that are married versus a man and a woman that are married. There's no difference in that. And if you do see a difference in that, you have a problem. Now, she said that but I've sat there and listened to this, and she's all calm and everything. And I'm thinking, and she's well-spoken, and I'm thinking to myself, this is what they're going to jam down the throat of our society. Now, the thing about it is, no matter how this world changes and tries to modify how it wants to see and believe certain things, there's certain things that are not going to change, and that's going to be a means of attack in these last days, because the people that are really going to hang on to what Jesus said, you're going to be a problem. It's going to be an issue. You're going to have issues, because as the society changes and you stand up and you say, well, no, I'm not going to believe that. I'm not going to believe that we all, y'all seen those bumper stickers that say coexist on the back of them, and they got all those different religious symbols on them to spell the word coexist? And they have another one too. I couldn't get close enough to the car to see it, but there was another one I couldn't see. It wasn't coexist, but it had the same symbols on it, but it spelled something else, but I couldn't get close enough to see what it spelled. But what they're trying to do, once again, is that unification. You got to be able to put Muhammad and Buddha and all these other religious philosophies at the same level as Jesus. And if you don't do that, you have a problem. If you can't see that Buddha and Confucius and Muhammad are just as important and just as viable and just as great as Jesus, then you have a problem. And you have an issue. This is the philosophy that's going to come down. And if we don't, and this is going on now behind the scenes, they're putting all this stuff together, and then eventually it's going to be, okay, who is not dealing with our
Hearing things.
oh no, that's the monitor for the baby.
Teaching in there, and you can hear her on the monitor.
No, it's downstairs.
That's downstairs. That's the teacher.
Downstairs. I
Yeah.
hear somebody. I thought I was hearing.
So it's the thing of, are you going to accept that or not? And I have made up in my mind, I'm not doing it. I'm not swallowing that. Now, fortunately, I still can keep my job. I still right now keep my house. I still can, go out and, in public, and we still can gather like we're gathering. Although in China, today, they cannot.
That's right.
In China today, they came and they just. Now I'm saying that based upon what my daughter texted me. I'm going to go. I haven't seen it for myself, but I believe that she texted me that because she was watching it while she was at work today. And so it's important for us to recognize that it's going to happen here. That's why a verse like this, where you think, a chapter like this, where you look at it and you go, I don't look like there's a whole lot of stuff happening in this chapter. It's so important because this is showing you that behind the scenes stuff that we are going to be dealing with ourselves. Now, I tell you this, if you don't deal with it, your children will deal with it. I don't know when it's going to happen. I can't say it's going to happen in 4 months or 4 years or 40 years. I don't know when. But it's going to happen. The scripture says it will happen, that we will become an offense to this world. But then the thing that makes me feel like it's going to happen pretty soon, when you start seeing it happen in other places. And you start hearing the verbiage, like what I heard last week, this woman talking about people that believe in holding on to the traditional teachings of Christ have a problem. Now they saying we got an issue. Well, I'm saying, well, you know what, maybe I do. If that's what you want to say, I got an issue, then I'm guilty. You know, I'm guilty. I got the issue because I'm not going to change what Christ says to appease what you want me to believe. Then I become your robot and I become a servant to what you say. No, I'm a servant of Christ. So therefore, I'm going to take on what the Lord says. So as we keep on, I don't have my clock. What time is it?
11:45.
All right, we got some time. I think we can get through this. All right. So he says he appeals to Caesar. In verse 12, it says, then...
No. 11.
No. Yeah. He says, I appeal to Caesar. Verse 12, then Festus, when he had conferred with the council, answered, thou hast appealed unto Caesar shalt thou go. All right? Now, so he said, okay, that's what's going to happen. You're going to end up going to Caesar. So now he has to wait until it's time for him to get there. So now while that whole aspect of waiting happens, there's some more stuff going on in the background. So let's see what else is happening. Verse 13. And after certain days, King Agrippa from Bernice came, and Bernice is his wife, and there's a story behind all of that stuff as well, about her history. We won't get into that right now, but if you want to do some studying on your own, you can check out who she is, and you'll find some interesting reading there. They came unto Caesarea to salute Festus. And when they had been many days, Festus declared Paul's case unto king, saying, there is a certain man left in bonds by Felix. Remember, Felix left him there because Felix wanted to, once again, please the Jews. That's why he left Paul in jail. All right? So verse 15, about whom when I was in Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews informed me, desiring to desiring to have judgment against him. All right, so he's saying that while he was down there, the other leaders of the Jews, the elders there, already kind of got into his ear and explained to him what they wanted to see done with Paul. 16, to whom I answered, it is not the manner of the Romans to deliver any man to die before that he which is accused have accused him face to face. That's part of the Roman government policies. And have license to answer for himself concerning the crime laid against him. Verse 17. Wherefore, when we were come hither without any delay, upon the morrow I sat on the judgment seat and commanded the man to be brought forth. Verse 18. Against whom when the accusers stood up, they brought none accusations of such things as I suppose. So he's saying that when they stood up there to accuse him, they didn't have anything against the man that they should have had. Because when you want to accuse somebody of something, you should have some evidence. You should have something to say as to why you think this man is guilty of what you say he's guilty of. All right? But they have to contrive charges and then try to fill the charges up later on, that's the problem. They just don't want Paul around talking about Jesus. Verse 19. It says, but had certain questions against him for of their own superstitions, and of one Jesus, which was what? Dead. Whom Paul affirmed to be what? Alive. That's the issue. Here's the whole thing in a nutshell. They know they put Jesus to death. Paul's talking about he has resurrected. You know, how appropriate for us to be reading this on Resurrection Sunday. This is the issue that's going on in the political world, in the leaderships, in governments to this day. These people are in this state, in this nation, in this area, in this world. They keep talking about Jesus is alive, and they need to stop listening to Jesus and listen to us. That's the issue in a nutshell. And as long as you're going to continue to listen to Jesus, and as long as you're going to focus on the Lord, you are going to become the problem. Now, like I said, right now, I mean, you still are the problem. Believe me. All of us that are loving the Lord and following Him, we are the problem. And though we have not been shot at, don't think that the gun with the scope on it is not what? Pointed right at us. They're keeping eyes on us. One of the reasons why they want to track us. One of the reasons why they want to know where we are. One of the reasons why you can't do anything. And even has the Bible said in Revelations, you won't be able to buy or sell without the Antichrist knowing it. And so they will know who's following Jesus. Because see, you go down to Walmart and you swipe your card. They know everything you bought. What you bought, why you bought it. Right? You go out there, you buy some clothes, you go to different places. Every time you buy anything, you got the Easy Pass on your car, whatever. Every time you go somewhere, boom, 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 they know where you've been, know how fast you drive, which route you like to take. Do you like to take the highway or not? They know all that stuff now. All right. You get those brand new cars now where you can go. I can start my
truck have that satellite OnStar.
OnStar, yep.
Yeah.
That's OnStar is trackable everywhere you go, whether you turn it on or not, whether you have it activated or not.
They still know.
They still know. And then you got these newer cars now where you can go in there and you can unlock and lock your car and start it. You can be in North Carolina and start your car up, right?
With your cell phone.
Well, that's it, right? Well, keep in mind, if they happen to recognize and you drive one of these cars, you just happen, and they go, oh, that's one of them Christians. He just crossed that Easy Pass thing. Okay, let's arrest him. They lock your car. You can't get out. Right? Now, you said, well, come on, that's far-fetched.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's far-fetched, but it's fetching quick. It's coming up quick.
It's not really far-fetched because I was watching one of those criminal shows.
No, bait car.
Bait car. They put the car out there for the people to steal it.
Yep.
And then once they steal it,
They lock him up.
they shut the car off. The guy, he'd be going like, why's the car stopping? Then he tries to get out. He can't get out because they lock him.
They put him right in jail, right in the car.
And they had the camera in there and everything.
There you go. All right. And so you wonder, and almost like I feel like I need to just read this because I think it's important for us to know the Bible has told us about this a long time ago. I gotta see if I can remember offhand memory where it is. All right. Well, I'm not going to take a whole lot of time because we got to finish up here. But the scripture I was looking for is where it says that that we would not be able to buy or sell unless we had the what? Mark of the beast, right? All right.
So you're in what, Revelation?
Yeah, I think it's like Revelation 13. But you know what? That's homework. Y'all check that out. You can find it. All right. Let's finish this up. Jesus becomes the issue. We see that in verse 19. Verse 20. And because I doubted of such manners of questions, I asked him whether he would go down to Jerusalem there to be judged of this matter. So now he's telling King Agrippa, Festus is explaining to King Agrippa, I asked Paul if he wanted to go down to Jerusalem and we could deal with it face to face. But the reason why he truly asked that was to get a political points from the Jewish leaders. He wasn't trying to be fair. See, they can put spin on anything. Make it just, the reason why I did this is because I was trying to do that. And no, you were trying to get political points. But they know how to spin it. They are so good at polishing things so it look a certain way, when in reality the whole motive is something else. All right? 21. But when Paul had appealed to be reserved unto the hearing of Augustus, I commanded him to be kept until I might send him to Caesar. Verse 23. Then Agrippa said unto Festus, I would hear the man myself. So now Agrippa said, I want to hear this man. This sounds kind of interesting. Let me hear this.
Elder Hughes, that's 14.
That's Revelation.
You could buy or sell anything without the mark.
That's Revelations 13, 14?
14.
14 what?
14, 17.
All right.
And no one could buy or sell it.
All right. Now, see, that's the part. Now, you can go and you can check that out and you read that whole thing for yourself. All right. And I think it's important for us to keep in mind that those things are going to happen. They're going to happen quick. Thank you, sir. Mm-hmm. All right. So, in 22 it says, and Agrippa said unto Festus, I will hear this man myself tomorrow. Said he, thou shalt hear him. So now he's going to go and he's going to kind of get before Paul himself. 23. And on the morrow, when Agrippa was come, and Bernice, with a great pomp. What does great pomp mean?
Ceremony.
Okay.
Festival. Pageantry.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, they just didn't walk up into the hall. They had what? All kinds of elaborate stuff going before them. Why? Because that's how they do stuff. We got something going on in our world today with a lot of pomp going on before. What is that? Y'all hear about it? It's coming up. It's in the royal wedding. I mean, they're going to have all kinds of pomp and circumstance and all kinds of glitz and glamour because this princess is getting married. And that's all part of that.
Prince is getting married.
The prince is getting married. Well, whatever. You see how well I'm following it, right? But all that is part of that aristocratic leadership. They're not so much heavy into the decision making, but they're more symbolizing, right? And remember, that's the way that the false prophet's going to be. The false prophet's going to have all kinds of pomp, and so he's going to be so, ceremonial and have all these different things that you got to do and all kinds of stuff. And he's going to have, it's almost like you can guarantee he's going to have. You. I don't want to sound. Well, if anyone's going to look. You know what? He's just gonna look different. I have to keep checking myself because sometimes you don't want to just say the wrong thing. But he's gonna be he's gonna have all kinds of pomp and circumstance and whatever. He's gonna have all that ceremonials. That's his thing. That's the false prophet, and the Bible talks about him as coming in that way. All types of showiness, and all of that. That's how but yet he's really he's a puppet of the Antichrist, and the Antichrist is following in the spirit of Satan. All right, so it's interesting. All right, where was we at? 23. It says, and then on the morrow, when King Agrippa was come down, Bernice. Okay, we read that. Yeah, they came down with all kinds of great pomp, and was entered into the place of hearing with the chief captains and the principal men of the city. So now, see, we got the chief captains, the principal men, we got all the heavy hitters, right? At Felix's commandment, Paul was brought forth. 24. And Festus, as I said, Festus's commandment. And Festus and King Agrippa and all the men which are present with us, ye see this man about whom all the multitude of the Jews have dealt with me, both at Jerusalem and also here, crying that he ought not to live any longer. All right, so now he makes this proclamation. This is the man that everybody's talking about in Jerusalem. All the Jewish leaders saying that this man should not be alive. He should have been put to death. 25. But when I found that he had committed nothing worthy of death, and that himself hath appealed unto Augustus, I have determined to send him, of whom I have no certain thing to write unto you, Lord. Wherefore I have brought him forth before you, and especially before thee, O King Agrippa, that after examination had I might have somewhat to write. So what he's basically saying is, I'm at a loss as to even what to say about this man. I don't really know what's going on. So I'm going to bring him here, we're going to let him have this audience, and then I'm going to see what's going on, see if I can get a better handle on it so I might have something more to write. And that sounds all what? Well and good. But once again, it's another show. It's another way of let me see how I can look like I'm really trying to get to the bottom. I really want to know the truth. I really want to understand this. But no, really what we want to do is celebrate his greatness. That's why the whole big pomp and circumstance. You could have done all that by just bringing Paul in and said, let's talk about it. You, me, and go into a little room, boom, 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 talk. No, we got to. I have to build myself up. I have to build my constituency. I have to build all this up and make it all wonderful, so people can just be in awe. But just look at how. Oh, they're not even concerned really about Paul. But did you see that? Did you see this? Did you see how many this they had? Did you see how many that they had? Did you see? Wow, did you see this? And the whole conversation is how wonderful the what? Circumstances, on all the celebration and all the introductions and all that was. And somewhere buried in there is the what? The issue that why we're even here. And that's Paul. So Paul becomes a means to build careers. And that happens today. There's going to be a lot of things going on. People are going to build their careers. And then there's going to be reasons for why certain careers end. But make no mistake about careers that end. We're going to get into a little thing a little later about some political leaders. Because don't think that Paul, we see Jesus, he was the first. Paul, we see Peter's going to be put to death. But then you think, okay, well, those were all the biblical leaders. There are some modern leaders that attack these systems that have been put to death, and we'll get into that as we get more and more into especially Paul's writing and some of Peter's, when we talk about some of these great martyrs, and you get to see there's a lot of stuff that happened not too long ago about people that want to expose the behind the scenes stuff that's going on, and the minute they talk about exposing it, they got put to death. And then somebody said, well, somebody else put it down. And if you're interested, when we break, I could play one for you. All right? It's about 10 minutes long. I'll let you listen to it. All right? And then you come to your own conclusions. All right? But I think it's interesting to understand that certain political leaders today, not all of them, are corrupt. There are certain ones God puts in there that really want to do the right thing. And I'm not saying they're perfect either. That's the other aspect. David was not corrupt, but David was not what? Perfect. So this is a lot of these political leaders. You can say, well, this person wasn't. Well, no, he wasn't. But he still was a man that believed in what God believed in. All right. So that's how David was. That's why the Bible said that David was a man after what? God's own heart. The final verse here says, "For it seemeth to me unreasonable to send a prisoner to send a prisoner and not withal to signify the crime laid against him." All right, and so that's where we'll stop. All right, and we'll pick that up again on next week. But once again, keep your ears open, because I got to double check if I'm going to be in town again. So keep your emails, because this is the busy time for Elijah and Taylor. So I might be out of town again, but I will keep you guys posted, and this will continue up until about the end of May, beginning of June. Then we'll get back to a more steady schedule. All right. Any comments or questions on what we've talked about?